Recording in progress. Something's always being recorded, isn't it? It seems. So the search for truth, we as meditators, it's when we go into the deep recesses of ourselves, we would hope that truth would be revealed. One of the most interesting statements in all of spirituality, in my humble opinion, is the phrase, we are in the world, but not of the world. It's another one of those paradoxical, seemingly senseless sayings that, taken in one way, is just one more thing to be dismissed or disregarded. I'm in the world, but not of the world. There's no foundation to that. Yet on the other hand, it could be as powerful a spiritual principle as we could ever find within our own consciousness. It could unlock doorways of understanding. We're in the world, but not of the world. What might that mean, and what might it mean to a meditator, and how might it lead to our liberation? Well, as we've discussed in the past, we seem to be thrown into this life, don't we? Have you ever had a child yell at you, "I didn't ask to be born"? It's a kind of a bratty thing to say, "I didn't ask to be born." But do you recall asked to be born? I don't, not at this phase of my development, but I certainly was born. That was evident, and so were you. And we were, as the great German philosopher of the early 20th century said, Martin Heidegger, he said, we're thrown into life. We're thrown into parents, we're thrown into situation, culture, civilization, time, a whole religion, lack of religion. God only knows. We're thrown into something. And then whatever we're thrown into exerts an extraordinary influence upon us, obviously, right? So we know that. We know how much of our nature and how much of our consciousness is shaped by nature itself. And that's undeniable. So that proves that we're definitely in the world. We are in it. We are locked into it with certain perceptual patterns that may be unshakable for a lifetime. That's a topic for another conversation. And if our patterns of perception are locked in place early on, then we are definitely in the world. And have you noticed the world has a very sticky, addictive, attractive, seductive nature to it? We get stuck on things. We develop attachments. And of course, this leads to the great Eastern principle of detachment. The Eastern principle of detachment says that suffering comes when we place our attachment on people, places, and things, and inevitably they will erode and disperse over time, leading to, one disappointment or one round of suffering after the next. Perhaps this is why Buddha named suffering as the number one of his four noble principles, suffering because of attachment to the worldly things. This is the condition of the one who is in the world. No matter how you arrange things, sooner or later, our arrangements will be dispersed. We're always rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, trying to get them in the right place. But the Titanic is always going down, so to speak. Well, that's an upbeat thought to leave with today, but I'm not leaving there, don't worry, because a great spiritual master says we're in the world, but not of the world. Well, let's see. If we could be in the world, but not of the world, it would mean that our ultimate essential nature is not worldly stuff. We're not made of physical matter. It's not our origin. It's not our essence. There's something deeper that's not of this world. Simply put, it's not a material underlying substrate. It really does beg this deepest of all fundamental existential, philosophical, religious questions that a person can ponder if they're really interested. And it's really an either or thing. Are we material, meaty creatures alive only temporally, or are we essential spiritual beings having a human experience? If we adopt the latter point of view, a great freedom becomes available that's not available to the material-minded person, and it simply is, we are in the world, but we're not of it. In any given moment, we can withdraw our frame of reference away from the objects of observation, and we can find a place inside of ourselves that is prior to, that is a priori to the events and material conditions of the world. In this, there is freedom. And so it seems to me like a great way to play life, as if life was a beautifully designed gift to us and not some sort of suffering inflicted upon us, as some spiritual teachers would say. We could say that we're in the world, but not of the world. This would mean that we could be attached and detached at the same time. We could have the sensibility and the wisdom to be delighted in what the world shows us in any given moment. A puppy, a grandchild, a mate, a worldly condition. But deep inside of us, we would know that that's not home. We know that that's just the passing mirage going by the screen of our mind. We could gain as much joy and as much peace and as much exhilaration and excitement and fun from the wrinkles in space-time that we possibly could, to the point of inexpressible joy, because underlying it, we would know there's something even infinitely more joyful and perfect underlying that. In this way, we assume and achieve our true spiritual status as a spiritual being having a human experience, rather than just a temporary human having a temporary experience, which, well, it doesn't end that well. I've got bad news for you, but you're going to croak. Probably not today, but sometime soon, and the game is over. And if that's all we are, then there's a sort of an unhappy ending to this, but there's no such thing. We are spiritual beings having a material experience. We are in the world, but not of it. So it's really an either or decision, and every human can make it if you want, or you can just be distracted by it. But if you do make it and live it, it can revolutionize your life overnight. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Wow, that was a spicy conversation. See y'all.